At some point in the 80s, developers realized something. The stars of concerts and records could also be stars of their own video games. Of course, that's not necessarily a good thing. These days, all games require music, but when the music, or at least the musicians, become the focal point of a game, that can lead to some hilarity, or awkwardness, or at least pinball? No, seriously, pinball. And that's one of the more normal entries. Let's take a look at 8 times that video game companies tried to monetize the popularity of a band via a video game, often with very, very strange results. In his heyday, Michael Jackson was the king of pop, truly. And the king of pop was involved with a series of video games, including being involved with the creation of music for Sonic 3, if you can believe that. There was also a planned Michael Jackson MMO RPG called Planet Michael. That is gonna have to be a video for later. That being said, the most well-known Michael Jackson video game was Moonwalker. The game itself came from a 1988 Michael Jackson film with the same name, and there are multiple versions of the game, including an arcade version, one for Sega, and a computer version. Sega was also responsible for the arcade version, and they leaned so heavily on the game that it actually featured rather prominently in some of their early Genesis Does What Nintendo Don't campaigns. The game is based off of the smooth criminal scene of the Moonwalker video. It's a beat 'em up, and the plot, if you can believe this one, features Jackson trying to rescue kidnapped children. In doing so, you attack with physical or magical powers, depending on the version of the game that you are playing. As you would expect, the physical attacks mirror Jackson's dance moves and involve high kicks or spin moves. Jackson can also perform special attacks known as dance magic that feature dance moves from Billie Jean, Smooth Criminal, or Beat It. Once all the children in a level are rescued, you get a special cameo by Mr. Bubbles, Jackson's well-known pet chimpanzee. I mean, honestly, why not? If I had a pet chimpanzee, I would put it in a game. It's also worth noting that, unlike other games on this list, Moonwalker was well received. Critics praised its graphics, animation, and gameplay. Want to remember this game and your misspent youth? Click on the link in the description to play it now. When you think of the Blues Brothers, you likely think of incredible musical talent, immense physical comedy, cutting-edge humor, and the tragic death of John Belushi, taken far, far before his time. What I'm guessing you don't think of is a platforming adventure. Yet here we are. Blues Brothers, the computer game, was released in 1993. You play as the Blues Brothers and must evade police in order to get to your big blues concert. You pick up objects, break windows in stores, attack bad guys, the usual stuff. The connection to the movie itself is marginal, but that's par for the course for games like these. The game was heavily marketed, having been made available for the IBM, Amstrad CPC, Amiga, Commodore 64, Atari, Nintendo, and Game Boy. Different platforms got very different reviews. For example, the Commodore versions got reviews that were north of 9 out of 10, while the Nintendo version got scores of 5.5 out of 10 at the absolute best. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information about the sales numbers of the game, but it must have done well enough because there were 2 sequels. First, you had the Blues Brothers Jukebox Adventure, released for the Super Nintendo, PC, and Game Boy. In this game, your goal is to defeat enemies and find a jukebox at the end of each level in order to advance. Then there was the Blues Brothers 2000, a platformer for the Nintendo 64 with a very similar plot, featuring you as Elwood and needing to rescue Mac and Buster. When you think of Motley Crue, you probably think of big hair, loud music, wild parties, and a video game version of pinball, right? No, not that last one? Oh, well, let me tell you about Crewball. In 1992, Motley Crue was still going strong, save for the breakups, the drugs, the women, honestly, pretty much everything. Anyway, regardless, someone, somewhere, had a brilliant idea. Motley Crue, but with pinball. Thus, Crewball was born. The game started development as a generic rock-oriented pinball game called Twisted Flipper before Motley Crue was added and crew-oriented theming was put into the game. This included the use of 3 Crew classics, Dr. Feelgood, Livewire, and Home Sweet Home. The game was developed by Electronic Arts and released on the Sega. In addition to Crew music, it also features an obnoxious neon style, very, very weird minigames featuring these nightmare skeletons for some reason, and this spinning face thing. Every now and then, you also get cutscenes with someone, presumably Tommy Lee, screaming, "Crank it up!" There's also a level system, as there usually is in these pinball games. If you knock out targets, you can advance to the top screen, which enables you to move through to the next level. Credit to Sega and EA, though. This is one of the more unique versions of any video game adaptation on this list. Just watch for all the spinning faces and little balls and all the... Okay, seriously, what is going on here? Did the developers have to do as much cocaine as the band before creating this game? Incidentally, you can actually play this game via an emulator, link below in the description. Next, we have Frankie Goes to Hollywood? Really? This band's heyday was from 1980 to 1987, and most people can name that one song, Relax. If they can name any, meet what might be the strangest and most abstract damn game on this list. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, the video game. This one was released in 1985 on a few different platforms, but it was mainly playable on the computer. And just how did you play Frankie Goes to Hollywood? I am so glad you asked. You start as a player in Mundainesville, not kidding, little on the nose, in search for the Pleasure Dome. What is the Pleasure Dome? Well, it's the name of Frankie's debut album, Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. And how does one find the Pleasure Dome? You must become a full person. To do so, players must play and succeed in 10 separate minigames, which allows them to fill 4 attributes: sex, war, love, and faith. Once that's done, you can become a full person and access the Pleasure Dome. The minigames, as you would probably expect, were insane. They featured portals, mazes, and the heads of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher shooting at each other. While trying to access the Pleasure Dome, you're also trying to solve a murder. Why? Don't ask questions. Anyway, you have to search for clues, open cabinets, inspect items, that sort of thing. Keep in mind this was 1985, so that was a relatively advanced feature. The design of the game was intentionally weird and contrasting. According to programmer John Gibson, the creative minds behind the game were trying to make a point. The game was an attempt to, quote, emphasize the essential mundaneness of life, but contrast that with the fact that there are many ways of escaping it. From one of the more obscure 80s bands to the biggest hits of the decade, let's talk about Journey, a band which might be the most emblematic of the 80s. The hair, the power ballads, the over-the-top emotional music, the works. Unable to resist their charm, Valley Midway released an arcade game featuring the band. The plot of this 1983 game? Help the members of the band retrieve their instruments in 5 different galaxies. So right away, we know we're off to a great start. The 5 levels, or 5 different minigames that were honestly pretty generic. You could have seen this in any video game or with any band. How generic were they? Well, when you play as the band, you're actually a black and white picture on a cartoon body. Seems kind of lazy if I'm being honest. The only real effort to make the game actually appear to be specific to Journey is the versions of Journey songs that play in the background. Of course, this was 1983, so the technology didn't quite exist to play the real songs. Anyway, defeat all 5 minigames and you make it to the final level, a Journey concert. In this level, you're a roadie who must stop alien fans from reaching the stage and stealing the instruments of the band, which sends you back to a harder version of the minigame. Hilariously enough, the technology which allowed for the photographs was actually developed for another game that would allow players to take photos of themselves. Of course, this had to be changed when one real-life player took a picture of their... You know what, guys? I want this video to be monetized so you can figure the rest out. This is why we can't have nice things. From 80s legend to music legend, let's talk about Queen and their video game, Queen the Eye, which doesn't sound creepy at all. This 1997 game, another electronic arts project, has a plot that someone who is only deeply disturbed or inebriated can enjoy. Follow this for a second. You play as Dubrak, an agent of the evil eye. That's lowercase e, capital Y, lowercase e. The eye is a machine that sees everything and has outlawed all creative expression. In the course of his duties, Dubrak finds a catalog of Queen music and is subsequently sentenced to death. The game follows his quest, first battling the evil watchers in an arena, and then his efforts to destroy the eye. For players, this meant combat, puzzle solving, and cutscenes, as well as a background that looks like it was rejected from Myst. Some of the songs are remixes of already existing Queen songs, like I Want It All in One Vision. Other songs are exclusive to the game itself. Regardless, the game came in 5 CDs and featured pre-rendered graphics that were based on Queen album covers. I'm giving this game some grief for its completely insane concept, but I'll say this. At least the game reflects Queen, and it wasn't just vaguely customized with some crappy graphics. The game extensively features Queen music and original remixes, Queen album colors, iconography, and more. The problem? Okay, there were a lot. First, this was the late 90s, but as many reviews noted, the graphics were dated even for the time. Part of the reason? The game was really bloated. It was very high concept. There were hundreds of pieces of art, handcrafted animation, stop-motion cameras, and 5 discs worth of music to incorporate. As a result, it took years to hit the shelves, and by then it already looked old. Still, to my untrained eye, at least it looks creative. Credit to Queen and EA for at least trying something new. Here's another strange one. Revolution X, a game with a plot that sounds very similar to The Eye, and gameplay that is relatively similar to, honestly, any on-the-rails shooter. It was released for arcades and home consoles in '94. The Kidnap Victims in this game? Aerosmith. In this game, a combination of corrupt governmental and corporate forces run the world through the New Order Nation, or NON. NON doesn't like kids, and has outlawed anything fun, including music, television, video games, and more. As the player, you go to see Aerosmith in Los Angeles, but NON forces kidnap them. Your job is to rescue the band by attacking various NON forces. The game was an on-the-rails shooter. In the arcade version, you had unlimited ammo and one CD that acted as a special weapon, and you basically just kept firing at bad guys. As is standard for games like this, different crates and boxes can be attacked to release special power ups or allow you to gain more points. You also gain points for releasing hostages. The one kind of cool thing about this game is there's no automatic rescue of all 5 Aerosmith band members. They are hidden in secret locations throughout the game, and finding them gets you a set of Aerosmith rings, which gets you more points. Incidentally, this game was supposed to be called Generation X and star Public Enemy, but that project died once Marvel Comics sent Midway, the developer of the game, a cease and desist letter noting copyright violations. As you would imagine, the game also features Aerosmith songs, including Walk This Way and Sweet Emotion. The arcade game was well received, with critics praising its gameplay and graphics. The computer and console ports? Not so much. Gameplay was awkward, the sound was atrocious, and the graphics were panned, leaving players crying. Sorry. Let's conclude with the Thompson Twins? Where did this stuff even come from? Just in case you forgot, the Thompson Twins were an 80s staple, one of those one-hit wonders that I don't think people think too much about now. As soon as you hear their hits, okay, hit, Hold Me Now, you will probably recognize the group. The Thompson Twins was large in the 80s, but never so big that it had a #1 single. Hold Me Now came the closest, hitting #3 in the US and 4 in the United Kingdom. Yet, that didn't stop the creation of this. The Thompson Twins Adventure. And yes, the more you hear about this, the stranger it gets. Let's start with the format. This 1984 game was published as a 7-inch flexi disc. What is a 7-inch flexi disc? Well, it's a format I never even heard of. These discs are basically 7-inch records that could be used for other formats like games. The game was only available for the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum. To play the game, players had to transfer the data of the record to the computer itself. A complicated process that barely anyone understood in the 80s. It involved an audio cassette, a cassette connector, and quite possibly an engineering degree. So I'll say this. They went for it. The game was based on the song Doctor Doctor. In the game, the 3 members of the band, Joe Leeway, Alana Curie, and Tom Bailey, must gather ingredients to make the Doctor's potion. In this adventure game, you play as the band members and walk through various locations, finding pieces of the potion. This game was actually a little bit more than just your average game. It was created as part of a promotion that ran in Computer and Video Games magazine. Players are supposed to find the location of the potion ingredients by listening to the song Doctor Doctor, as well as by listening to the intro message that was recorded by the Thompson Twins. There was then a contest that took place over 2 months, and players who found the potion were supposed to submit their answers to the magazine. Winners got tickets to see the Thompson Twins, and 10 runner-ups would also get prizes. Obviously, a game like this isn't going to make a major impression, but the Thompson Twins themselves were very interested in the game, and it was actually a hit with readers. Computer and Video Game Magazine reported hundreds of contest responses, and it was their most successful contest at the time. Want to play? You're in luck. The game is considered abandonware, and it's all yours, with a link in the description. So, I gotta admit, this video is actually kind of depressing. Why? Honestly, there's only 2 kinds of games on this list. First, there's the generic copy and paste games like Journey or Crew Ball that really had nothing to do with the band. They were generic and could have featured any band, and often they actually did feature another band originally. Then there were the more imaginative, expressive games that had a lot more involvement from the band in question, like Queen the Eye or the Thompson Twins. And those were just strange, lacked mass appeal, and often were critical flops. I guess it just goes to show, bands and music are usually, but not always, a terrible mix. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, and honestly you must have, you made it to the end, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button, and check out some of our more videos in the link that is now on your screen. Have a wonderful day out there, friends. See you next time.